The new TFT set is almost here, and with it comes a new ranked season. Even though ladder will just receive a soft reset, it is still important to have a great start into the new season. I hope this video will act as a crash course for the new set to help you understand everything right away. But just before we get started, I'm willing to bet that you can't subscribe to this channel before this Ezreal clears the enemy board. Are you ready? Go! And hey, even if you didn't make it, I still appreciate your support. Let's get started. The largest trade that is joining in set 8.5 is called InfiniTeam, with a total of 6 units. The trade has 3 different tiers at 3, 5 and 7, progressively becoming stronger when you go deeper into the trade. With 3 units you can activate the trade, which will spawn 2 portals on your board. One will be active and the other one stays dormant until you activate the 5 piece of this trade. The portals can only spawn either in the front row or in the back row, and they will only have an effect if you place an InfiniTeam unit on them. The spawn locations will be the same for every lobby, so this mechanic should feel familiar if you remember the socialite hexes from set 6. When combat starts and you have an InfiniTeam unit on a portal, it will create a weaker version of this unit for one fight. And while the combat unit might deal less damage, all of the traits like Defender or Sure Shot will still work for them. Your copies will also receive a full item for every augment that you currently have. This means in stage 2 you only get 1 item, starting in stage 3-2 you receive 2, and once you reach stage 4-2 you will get a total of 3 items. These items are also tailored to each unit type. So a frontline unit like Shen will receive tank items like Varmox or a Stoneblade. An AP carry like Twisted Fate will receive a Rabadons or a Gunblade, and an AD carry like Sivir will end up with items like Deathblade or Giant Slayer. Arguably the coolest trait that is joining in the mid set is called Riftwalker. It is a 3-piece trait consisting of Pyke, Vex and Jhin. When you activate the trait, a Zac will spawn with the same ability as in set 8.0. The main difference is that he won't split up into blobs when he dies. Zac also works very similar to previously summoned units we had in the past. This means that the star level of each Riftwalker will give him bonus HP. You can even run a Riftwalker unit more than once if you're looking to maximize this. Zac will always tether to his closest Riftwalker ally and gain their most bottom trait. Think of it like you are putting a temporary emblem on him, and with this mechanic you can tether him to Pyke for Hacker, to Vex for Mascot, or to Jhin for Renegade. It's pretty much up to you which trait you think is the most useful. You can also receive a Riftwalker emblem from a Tome of Traits. This emblem is incredibly powerful in the early game since you don't need Jhin to spawn Zac, making it very valuable for win streaking. You can also tether Zac to the unit with the Riftwalker emblem to gain traits like Brawler or Defender if you're looking to reach specific chase traits. For the first time ever, a unit now exists twice in the same set, and the honor goes to Ezreal. First up, we still have the tier 2 underground Ezreal from set 8, though he has now slightly different traits with Quickdraw and Parallel. With set 8.5, Riot is adding a new legendary unit, the Ultimate Ezreal. He is the main late game AD carry who will replace Aphelios. Placing both Ezreal on your board will activate the Parallel trait, which is unique to them and will enhance their abilities. The underground Ezreal will start shooting a large wave instead of his normal ability, which travels over the entire map, giving you much better access to the enemy backline. This can be quite powerful in Ezreal reroll since it allows you to bypass the enemy tanks. The Ultimate Ezreal cares a lot less about this trait. He simply spawns an additional portal, so you can pretty much treat it as a small damage increase, but not something you have to include in late game. With set 8.5, we will also see some changes to admins, which will have a huge impact on how this trait will be played. First up, Soraka is gone, and Warwick joins as a tier 4 admin brawler. Warwick is an AD tank hybrid similar to Zed, who likes items like Titan's Resolve, Hurricane or Quicksilver. His AP scaling gives him more Omniwamp, which is quite useful, but it still makes all of the AP admin programs we previously had a lot less impactful compared to before. Riot also decided to give us 4 selections instead of 3, which will make it much easier to find an admin program that is actually usable in your spot. Unfortunately, they also decided to remove most of the mana generating admins like mana on kill or mana for allied units dying. Speaking of the allied death admin, this is something I have to address and something for you to remember. One of the reasons this program was so powerful is because it worked with the hacker trait and the phony frontline augment. These two interactions are both getting removed in set 8.5, which will heavily decrease the effectiveness of this admin program. I don't know about you, but recons were definitely a thorn in my side, and I'm glad that the trait ended up receiving a rework. Whether the new Quickdraw trait will end up as popular as the recon reroll will remain to be seen, but it's quite a unique trait and it doesn't exactly work like people think it does. The trait reads that after every 2 damaging ability projectiles, Quickdraw units fire a bonus projectile, but this is somewhat misleading, so it's best to showcase what the trait does for all of the 4 Quickdraw units. First up, we have Lucian. He fires 4 shots in his target's direction, which makes this a pretty simple case. With Quickdraw activated, he will always fire 2 additional shots since the trait doesn't require the ability to land. Ezreal is already our first special case. A normal Ezreal will first throw out a projectile which slows the enemy attack speed, followed by a projectile dealing damage. Even though the first part of his ability didn't deal damage, the Quickdraw trait will treat this as 2 projectiles, meaning you will always receive a bonus projectile for every single time Ezreal is casting his ability. If you activate Parallel for Ezreal, this won't work anymore, and he now needs to complete 2 ability casts to receive a bonus wave. Kai'Sa is our next special case, but the way she works is very simple. In her case, her auto attacks count as the damaging projectiles, so activating Quickdraw will simply give her an additional attack after every 2 attacks. This will help to proc her ability faster, but this also means that going deeper into Quickdraw will simply cause her auto attacks to deal more damage, which isn't something you want to aim for. Lastly, we have Misfortune, and thankfully she's not too complicated either. When you activate Quickdraw, she will simply cast more waves, which results in a considerable damage increase for her ability, so in her case it's usually worth going deeper into the trait. You might remember that in set 8 we had a brief period where items from your units on your bench would drop off when you upgraded them to 2-star. If you like this kind of mechanic, then I have good news for you, because from now on every component from every carousel will drop to your item bench instead of staying on the unit. This will make it much easier to collect upgrades in the early game, since you aren't required to sell your first unit anymore if you wanted the item on somebody else. You will also never have to avoid a unit in a later carousel anymore, just because you ended up being afraid of an auto combine which could ruin your game. This mechanic in return will also have even more consequences, because it allows Riot more creative freedom when it comes to upcoming carousels. So let's take a closer look at what we can expect from one of the biggest changes in the mid-set with the glitched carousels. Every game you will play, you will always have a glitched carousel in stage 2, with every carousel afterwards having a small chance to be glitched as well. There are a lot of different variations. They range from receiving 2 components instead of 1 to getting an additional duplicator or dice together with your item. Sometimes you won't be receiving a unit at all and instead end up with an item anvil, a tome of traits, a target dummy, or a glitched egg. These glitched eggs will take up spot on your bench, and there are 3 different tiers for the eggs. The longer it takes to hatch, the better the outcomes. Even though eggs can have some pretty amazing outcomes, especially if you receive them from a stage 3 carousel, overall you will usually just end up with an extra item and some bonus gold most of the time. I hope for you that you weren't a big fan of LaserCorps, because this trait really has gotten the short end of the stick. Senna got removed, the emblem isn't craftable anymore, and both the gold and prismatic version of this augment will only give +1 to the trait. In return, the trait now gets improved with 3, 4, 5 and 6 LaserCorps. The really interesting part about this trait is now starting at the 5 piece, which requires Warwick together with an augment or a Mordekaiser. If you reach the 5 piece, all of your units will now start with a drone, and if they die, die, their drones will be reassigned to the closest unit with a drone. This effect is obviously still very powerful, but extremely awkward to reach unless you have an ideal setup for it from the very start. In its current state, not a lot of players managed to create a successful LaserCorps setup, so it remains to be seen how this rework will turn out in the future. It's also worth looking into the changes that were made to the threat units. Vel'Koz, Cho'Gath and Zek were all removed, though Zek somewhat managed to stay alive as a summon from the Riftwalker trait. As replacements, we received Morgana and Aatrox. Morgana is a new tier 3 unit, and while your first instinct might be to put her in the front line, this is not where you want her. She has 4 attack range, so she fits perfectly in the last row, and her ability will prioritize the closest targets and apply both Armor Pen and Magic Shred to the enemy's hit. This makes her perfect next to your carry to maximize the damage on the enemy tanks and protect them from an incoming Hecarim. Aatrox, on the other hand, will replace Zek as a filler tank, and he has the ability to give himself a bunch of bonus HP with his first ability cast. HP items like Vammox or the Brawler Emblem are extremely effective on him since his ability has an HP scaling. He is also a great candidate for the Mecha Prime Emblem if you're aiming to create a super tank to buy yourself more time. As for my final mechanic, let's talk about a minor but still surprisingly relevant change to the Defender trait. In set 8.0, when you place the Defender on your board, even if you didn't activate the trait, they would taunt the enemy team a few seconds into the fight. This could sometimes cause major issues, from units pathing in a weird way to your carry Riven getting focused down. This will all change since the Defender trait does not have a taunt mechanic anymore. This will make it much easier to focus down units in the early game instead of your team swapping to the enemy Poppy randomly, and this will likely make teamfights feel less random. Well, this video is probably already too long at this point, so I hope this list and my new meta sheet will help you to get a good head start into the new season. There are still plenty of new mechanics to discuss, especially the changes to the hero augment selection, but this is something I want to address in a future video, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. I hope you learned something, and see you next time.